Hello and welcome. I'm Lenny Tvedten, and each month we're visiting with Martin County veterans on a series called Their Sacrifices, Our Freedom. Today joining me are Jeff Hagen and Gary Schaub. First of all, thank you for your service and for being in my book. I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
First of all, I think we'll just start with telling us a little bit about yourself. And Gary, let's start with you. Just a little bit about yourself.
Well, I pretty much have been working in civil engineering most of my life. Started at a pretty early age. My dad was a county highway engineer over in Freeborn County, and our family moved a couple of times when I was very young. Glenwood, Minnesota is my birth town. We lived in Morris, Minnesota, and eventually moved to Albert Lee, Minnesota, where I spent most of my early life going to school there. And after that, went to college at Mankato State and ended up being drafted into the Army, got married.
That's a big government job, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Jeff?
Well, everybody pretty much knows me. I grew up in this area. Spent a lot of time here. I was when I graduated, I went to broadcasting school, and I was in radio for a little while, and decided at that point that it was time for me to do a little bit of a change. So I decided to go into the Army. I enlisted and was in the Army for 3 years. Ended up being sent in '91 to the Persian Gulf, and so I spent the last part of my tour there, and came back to the United States. Went back into radio for a little while. Mm-hmm. Then I decided to go into television for a few years. Did that for a number of years, and I received a call one day to wondering if I would be interested in managing the Fairmont Photo Press. And so I became the manager there and was there for 7 years. And when I took another call, and that one was from a little bit higher authority, I was called to I'm training to be a minister right now. I'm with St. John's Lutheran Church in Sherburne, and I'm currently in the seminary and working my way towards ordination. So
Good. And you were also on the Martin County Historical Society Board of Directors.
Yes, I was. Yep, enjoyed that very much.
And put up with me.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk just a little bit about your military experience. Things like the branch of the service you were in, if you haven't already mentioned that, where and when you served, your duties, just anything just in general that you think was important from your time serving in the military. And Gary, do you want to?
Sure. Well, I was drafted in 1968, approximately May that year. Went to basic training at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Finished there and was sent to AIT at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And I went through that training for artillery. And then I applied for NCO Academy and was accepted, finished that, and then I was off to working with the U.S. Army Testing Center there at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And after that was done, then I got orders to ship to Vietnam, where I'd be assigned to one of the divisions over there.
Okay, and AIT is Advanced Infantry Training?
They'll say infantry or individual training.
Right.
Either one will work.
NCO is non-commissioned officer?
That's correct. Yeah. When I graduated, I was a buck sergeant, E5.
Sure. Okay, Jeff?
Well, when I enlisted in 1988, I went to basic training in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and then from there I was in advanced infantry training. I took mine actually in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and once I completed that, they sent me over to Germany because I had asked if it was possible if I could serve over in Germany. My grandparents at the time were living in Amsterdam, Holland. Plus, I toured Europe quite a bit when I was growing up, and I wanted to do some more of that, so I was assigned to a field artillery unit in the Army over there. It was the 1st Infantry Division Forward, which is the Big Red One, and I worked in it was a field artillery battalion, so I was in the ammo platoon. I was the clerk. I handled all of the paperwork and all that type of stuff, and then later on, my sergeant major of the battalion needed a driver, so I became his driver and did a lot of time behind the wheel driving generals and all those guys when they were coming to tour. But and then while I was in Germany, That was right after the Berlin Wall came down. They were closing a lot of posts at the time. Our post was one of them. It was in Neu-Ulm, Germany, or New-Ulm, Germany. Ours was one of the posts that was decided to close down. We were in the process of packing. I was planning on going to Fort Polk, Louisiana. In fact, my stuff was shipped there, but that's when the ground war, or the air war, I should say, from the Persian Gulf broke out. And my MOS, or my training, was in the truck driving, and that's what I went into the service with. Was a truck driver. They needed a lot of truck drivers for the at that time, so they sent all of us from there, from where I was in Germany. I was put on a C-130 and flew down into Saudi Arabia and was driving trucks down there, semis. So that was what my time, and I did that until, what was it? I was discharged in June of 1991. Came back here at that point. So that was my time in the military.
So how was the transportation system down there? How were the roads and everything?
There really wasn't roads. It was flat. I mean, it was as flat as this table, and it was all sand, I guess you'd call it. And the only way we knew we were driving on roads is they had markers every once in a while saying whatever the road name was. And yeah, it was interesting. When you're driving a civilian semi, on the roads down there, and there was no such thing as traffic laws. You're in a war. Your job is to get your things there. I was hauling tanks and stuff up into Iraq and Kuwait, and then what I would do is I would bring captured tanks or captured different pieces back, and POWs, because I had a Western Star. It was a super sleeper semi, so we could actually haul people back. So I would bring MPs back, and they'd with captured Iraqi forces. So.
Any danger in terms of being fired on or anything?
Oh yeah, I was one of my driving. Actually, one of my earlier runs that we were doing up into Iraq. I'm driving along, and all of a sudden I heard this big crash. Realized my windshield had broke out. Well, what it was these guys would be sitting along in the sand dunes or wherever they were protected from, and the snipers, they would shoot at you. Boy. And so, of course, I stopped my semi and crawled underneath, and then all of a sudden it dawned on me, I'm looking up, and there's the fuel tank for the... Yeah. So that's not a good place to be. I got back in and just continued on the run then, yeah. So without a windshield.
And Gary, you were in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And did you experience that as far as being fired upon as well?
Well, yeah. I was with the... I probably should say I got over there in April of 1969. And
right in the thick of it.
Yeah, left Oakland, California, then flew over, stopped in Guam on the way, and landed in it'd be Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base there in Saigon. And then we went directly to what they call the 90th replacement, in which case I was picked up by the 101st Airborne Division and shipped up to I Corps. Mm. And from there, I was assigned to A Battery of the 1st of 321st Artillery. And there was 3 batteries, Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. And there's 6 howitzers per battery. Mm-hmm. I was a crew chief on a howitzer, a 105 millimeter. And it was the M102 version, so it was a low profile. We didn't have the trail sections like you normally see with the 105s. These were considered brand new, and they allowed you to rotate 360 degrees without picking up the howitzer itself. It would actually rotate around. Very, very nice weapon to use over there for transport. It was easily carried by Chinooks. Yep. And we had what we called A-22 bags, which were strung underneath the howitzer, and then by straps, you'd carry these, and we carried our ammunition and personal items and whatever from place to place with that. We did convoy a few times, but most of our moves were made by Chinook helicopter from one mountain to another, or hill, or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Well, thinking back to your experiences, if you could pick out one experience that would be your most memorable from the time you served, what would that be?
Probably when we moved, we had to hook up to the Chinooks, which would hover over the top of us. So, that was kind of that's what the crew chief was supposed to do. It was pretty hazardous because that Chinook, it's going up and down, and you had to hook it into their clevis device that they had. Right. And try to stay kind of in visual communication with the man that was running the hoy or the hooks. In fact, that's what we call a Chinook. We just call them the hooks are coming. So we never said Chinooks.
Sure.
And from there, I would guess that the experiences I had were numerable. I was on Bac Mao, which was second highest mountain in South Vietnam. And it was just a little over a mile high. And we were within sight of the South China Sea, so it was very picturesque. It actually had been a French resort area. It had a small little town, a little Catholic church, and numerous houses and stuff that were made for the hierarchy in the French and Vietnamese military. So we occupied that. Most of them were blown up and destroyed, but we had command of, being that high, we had command of the area, so that's why they wanted us in there.
Sure.
We had, oh my gosh, it was cold up there. I wore 3 pairs of fatigues. The wind and rain was horrendous at times.
Sure.
And it was just a very narrow strip of land. You could, I suppose, about 150 feet over from edge to edge, and maybe about 300 feet long. So it was.
Okay, Jeff, what about you? Maybe you already mentioned your most memorable.
Actually, I had quite a few of them when I was in Germany itself. I had a lot of interesting things take place, especially when you're in an ammo platoon. Our job was to handle nuclear rounds. We trained on them. We actually did touch one once, yes. But most of the time we were training with dummies because you would practice on if there would be a code sent down if they decided they wanted us to arm the nuclear rounds. So we'd practice codes, and they wouldn't tell us if it was a practice or not. Right up until the time when they said, okay, that was just a practice. We were arming it thinking it potentially could be the real thing, just hoping that it wasn't. But that was in Germany. But I think probably my most memorable part of my time was when I was first sent down to Saudi Arabia into the Persian Gulf. When we first got down there, the trucks from the United States hadn't arrived yet because they were coming by ship, the semis. So we were using local vehicles. I called them Ninja Turtles because they were old Mercedes semis, I guess you can call them, but they're extremely old. And because we weren't familiar with the territory, our first couple runs that we did, we actually rode with different drivers from different countries. Mine was Egyptian, and of course I didn't speak any of his language. He didn't speak a lick of English. So that was interesting going up. But our first run that we made, we were in convoy with, and we were hauling, like I said, tanks up there. And these are extremely heavy tanks. Their equipment was not made to haul this kind of weight, and so we were up there just on this side of the Iraq border, and my truck, the trailer axle snapped. So of course the rest of the convoy had to go on. We had to stay behind until they could get another truck to come by to grab the tank that was on there, and we could nurse ours back home. So that first night I was out there, I can remember it was really dark, and I was on guard because we had this tank there. And I can remember looking in the distance, and you could see this flashing going on. You could hear the explosions, and didn't know at the time, but apparently that was where the front lines were at that point on the ground war. And all I can remember was, here I am, a farm boy from Minnesota, over in this country that has nothing but sand, and what am I doing here?
Well, thank you, Gary and Jeff, for joining us today, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
I'd also like to thank our viewers and our sponsors, the Mike Gary family, Sweet Financial Partners, Erpelding Voigt and Company, CPAs, Lacey Prentice, American Legion, post number 36 for making this show possible. We'll see you next time on Their Sacrifices, Our Freedom.